Darling witches, welcome to my channel. Can we talk about The Craft, okay? Not the remake, the original 1996 masterpiece that launched a million millennial witches. I adore this movie so much, and I rewatched it again recently, and I just want to chat one up with you guys about it. I just want to talk up a storm about this incredible film, some of the perceptions that I had about it as I watched it many, many times growing up, as I experienced it as a young, angsty teen goth witch, and how I feel about it now as a very fully grown woman. There are going to be spoilers throughout this video, so anybody that hasn't seen it, I recommend highly going to watch it first. And for all my fashion girlies of every single gender, there is going to be a breakdown of my favorite outfits throughout the movie, because yes, the outfits are absolutely sublime. The fashion is on point. Okay, let's start from the beginning. I love the opening scene of The Craft. It's so cinematic. There is so much stuff, so much witchy paraphernalia absolutely everywhere. How did they afford all of this as well? Because it's just the three of them. So it's pre-Sarah arriving into the coven, and it's pre-Nancy getting all the money, right? So either Bonnie and Rochelle were getting serious amounts of pocket money on a monthly basis, or they took their five-finger discount too far. Who knows? But whenever I talk about the urge towards perfectionism in witchcraft, I always compare it to the opening scene of The Craft. I always say, like, look, sometimes we just want our practice to feel like the opening scene of The Craft, because it is so satisfying to watch these girls putting all these herbs and candles and crystals and bits and pieces on this incredible table as they meditate together as a group. It's just a very exciting opening to any movie about witchcraft. So I love this opening scene. It's so special. The opening credits to The Craft are also totally iconic, with the random like occult imagery, and then you're up in the clouds, and then you hear that incredible cover of Tomorrow Never Knows by Our Lady Peace, I think, and it's just really awesome. Like, I really love that hypnotic drum beat from that track. It was definitely Ringo Starr's finest hour, and it leads us into the movie sensationally. Every single time I put The Craft on over the years, when it gets to the opening credits, I feel like I'm locked in, I'm strapping in, I'm ready to watch this movie. I'm very excited from that point. Snakes are a very, very big feature of this film. If you are afraid of snakes, then you do not like this movie. Hands down, you just can't watch it. And the first time that we actually see a snake is when Sarah is in the cab with her father and stepmom going to the new place in LA, and she sees a snake on a tree, and that is the first foreshadowing that we get that something foreboding might be happening, something that is filled with power and filled with intrigue. And I remember the very first time I saw the film, and she's in that rainy cab and she sees the snake, I'm like, ooh, what's going to happen? What is going to happen? Little did I know everything was going to happen. This movie is wow. And it starts as it means to go on, I think, very much. Sarah is obviously the principal character, and when she arrives at her new home, she takes this photograph, this black and white photograph of a woman out of one of the moving boxes and puts it on a table. And the significance of this moment is only lost on you the very first time you see the movie, because every other time you see it after that, you know that that is Sarah's deceased mother, and that she is a witch, which is something that Sarah doesn't know yet. She doesn't know that her mother was a witch. So there's kind of like that generational, hereditary witchcraft theme that goes on in this film. So that's sort of like something that you come to understand obviously a lot later in the film. So this next part of the film right at the beginning is where we see the vagrant guy with the snake. Okay, so Sarah goes downstairs, she's grabbing a few things to take back up to her room because she's unpacking, and this guy, this disheveled looking guy, comes in from the rain holding a snake and saying, like, I found this snake, do you want it? And then Sarah's dad like chases the vagrant off and kills the snake. Did anybody have a theory of what was going on with this by all accounts kind of like homeless guy or vagabond kind of guy with the snake trying to get Sarah's attention? I definitely had a theory when I was younger, and I think that theory still holds true today, and I'll explain it to you a little bit later in the video. But that is the first time anything happens that is very sort of jarring in the film. And again, we see the snake. Like, very quickly we understand that this is a theme. One thing that I always thought was a really nice touch is when Sarah goes for her first day at this prestigious looking Catholic school that she goes to, she's walking into the building and she looks up at the crucified Christ on the building. And I just found that really funny and a nice touch considering what ends up to go on with all of the witchcraft stuff. So yeah, it was just kind of the look that she gave as well. She looks like a piece of religious iconography, looking up above and kind of like beholding Christ as she walks in towards what is going to be happening, towards her fate with these witches and all the drama that's about to unfold. Then we come to the iconic moment that we see Nancy, Bonnie and Rochelle for the very first time stalking through the halls. They are being mocked by the jocks who kind of like cross themselves as they walk through, and they are looking like a mean, lean, esoteric fighting machine, the three of them. So immediately I was hooked. I was very engaged. I was like, who are these three? Okay, let's go. Can we talk about the noose in Nancy's locker for a second? I think the first time I saw the film, I was too young to understand what she was pulling out of her locker. And I think I remember wondering, is this an American thing? Is this just something that I don't understand? Like, what is that thing that she's pulling on that's coming out of her locker? It is a noose. It is a big black noose. I love that. That was a really interesting touch. I wonder if that was in the script, or if someone just came along and was like, you know what would be really goth? You know what would really sort of give Nancy flavour very, very early into the story? Let's pop a noose in her locker and she can just like pull it out and play with it as she's talking to the girls. Like that would be iconic. And indeed, I think it really is fairly iconic, I have to say. I'm wearing Nancy. As you can see, this is my Nancy Downs t-shirt from the Sparrow Boy. Love it. He's sorry. And you know, for anyone who understands how important the craft is to me, you will understand how important this scene is to us.
I love a woman in uniform.
Okay, so then Sarah is in French class and we see one of the jocks who actually was the guy that played Travis in Clueless. And when I saw the craft, it was really confusing to me because I had to rework it in my head so that he was no longer the cute little skater boy Travis from Clueless, but actually this horrible jock guy in the craft, this numbskull in the craft. So, but I think that guy was pretty heavily cast in teen things in the 90s, and he was a joy to behold. He was great on screen, I must say. Not sure of the actor's name, but definitely enjoyed his casting in this very much. He's like the typical jock joker guy that you just know is going to give the girls problems.
What is that snail trail over there saying about me?
One thing I really want to make sure I mention is the pencil telekinesis scene. So it's basically in this same French class, right? Sarah actually manages to make the pencil that she has stand up on its own and twist independently using the witchy power of her mind. And this is when Bonnie clocks her and sort of like gasps, and Sarah's concentration breaks and the pencil falls. That is a classic scene in this film. And it's also the moment that these two sort of forge a connection. Sarah's connection to these three girls starts to form at that point because Bonnie is looking for a fourth girl to be in the coven to complete the circle. And Sarah obviously has a lot of witchy power that she's not yet fully in control of, and she doesn't really understand. And I remember the first time I saw this film, I was very nervous for Sarah in that moment because even at that young age, I recognised that there are some powers and some secrets that you should keep to yourself until you really know people, and that you should not reveal things to your peers too quickly or have them understand too much about you until you know who they are. So the first time I saw this film and Bonnie sees Sarah with that pencil, I'm like, oh my gosh, Bonnie knows that Sarah is a witch. Bonnie's probably a witch, right? Like, what is going to happen here? So Sarah meets Chris for the first time, Chris Hooker, who is played by the legendary Skeet Ulrich, okay? Every single person at this point in time when this film came out who was remotely attracted to men was at least slightly attracted to Skeet Ulrich. I remember having bi panic during this scene. Skeet Ulrich's real name, interestingly, is Brian Ray Trout, I remember learning in an interview many moons ago. But Skeet Ulrich has that star power. And he plays the typical, beautiful, overconfident, all-American jock insanely well. He's so incredibly cast for this film. Everything that he says is either vacuous or cruel. And really, aside from his beauty, you just want him to go away and get gone. Like, you really have this feeling that this is not a guy that you ought to trust. And Sarah is really in the shark's mouth talking to him and obviously feeling this attraction to him. I read somewhere a long time ago that Robin Tunney was Skeet Ulrich's friend in real life and actually actually got him to audition for this role, or somehow had something to do with securing the role for him. And it's brilliant because I can't think of anyone that I would have rather to play this prick than Skeet Ulrich. He just did so well. And anyway, during this scene where he first meets Sarah, he warns Sarah against hanging out with three girls, and he describes them as the bitches of Eastwick and explains that they are witches and that they're shady and that they're slutty and that they're not to be trusted, and that Bonnie has burn scars all over her body as if that's supposed to be some terrible thing. Like, we can see right off the bat, Chris is a prick, okay? Chris is very prick coded. The next scene after this, I think it's pretty much the next scene, is when Sarah goes to watch Chris at football practice after school, and the girls approach her, and this is the first time that the fashion floored me in this film, okay? Because Nancy rocks up in this PVC trench coat. She's got the collar popped open. She's got a delicate rosary on. She's got like silver crucifix earrings, and she's accessorized with this really rather hefty black book about tarot that's like under the crook of her arm. And obviously at this point, I am completely engaged. My teenage self is more obsessed with Fairuza Balk than I had been with anything else in my life. She looked sublime in this scene. Unbelievable. And she warns Sarah against Chris, and you definitely get the sense from what she says that she has been hurt by Chris, that she's been betrayed by him in some way. And so you definitely get this sense that like Chris is really not groovy, okay? And then they invite Sarah to go with them to the Witchy shop, and that's where things get unbelievably epic. Like, really, this is where I'm so locked in when I'm watching this as a teenage girl, and I'm still locked in to this day. I really like this scene when Nancy tries to kind of warn, or they all basically try and warn Sarah. It's very reminiscent of what a lot of teenage girls experience in high school when, you know, your adolescence is really kicking in, your hormones are pumping around your body, you want popularity, you want validation, you're leaning into your sexuality, and it's almost like you're in shark infested water, and very often it will be other girls and femmes that will warn you, right? So it is really reminiscent. In fact, one thing that I will say about The Craft, my loves, one thing I will definitely say about it is that watching it now as a very much adult woman, I kind of see witchcraft, the witchcraft and the magic in this film as a metaphor for adolescence and teenage hormones and coming into your feminine power and coming into your feminine rage. I see it as a metaphor. So it's almost like the magical girl kind of genre in anime, that sort of magical rite of passage where you step into your power, your sovereignty, your independent thought and your sexuality, and it's dangerous and it gets out of control, and you really have to figure out what you're going to do with it and how you're going to do it while you're navigating all of these various dangers and these various things that could take you off track. So that's kind of how I watch the movie a lot of the time now. I still enjoy it, obviously, primarily because I'm a witch and it's a movie about witchcraft. But is it really a movie about witchcraft, or is it a movie about, you know, being a teenage girl in a fucked up patriarchal world? That is my question. Or at least that is one of the kind of sub themes that I think comes through for me very strongly now in adulthood. On the way to the Witchy store, the girls see that Sarah has scars on her wrists and they ask her to explain. And she explains that she had previously made an attempt on her life. And that is another part in the movie where it's obvious that Sarah is kind of sharing with these girls. They're getting to understand a little bit about her. Bonnie's already seen that Sarah has some measure of witchy power, and now they're hearing about this really traumatic part of her past. Again, I remember having this feeling when I was watching the movie as a teenager. This is not good. This is scary, right? She shared something that could really make her vulnerable to attack. And of course, we know later on that it very much does. They use it to fuck with her mind. They use it as part of this really insidious glamour that they do on her towards the culmination of the movie. Nancy says to Sarah that it's punk rock that she has these scars on her wrists, right? She says, punk rock, let's go. And then she puts her arm around Sarah as they go into the Witchy store. And I remember thinking like, oh, I'm scared of Nancy. I'm not sure if I can trust these girls. I'm not sure if I can trust the situation. But you can see there that Nancy's like trying to foster closeness with Sarah and kind of pulling her into the world that they're a part of. And indeed, they're literally pulling her into the world because they take her into the Witchy store, which is one of the most epic scenes in a witchcraft movie ever. ever, and I will die on that hill. A little commotion for the Witchy store, please. This is a very LA coded esoteric shop, and you've got Assumpta Cerna playing Lario, the witch that is working in the shop and owns the place. It's full of stuff that every teenage witch wanted. I wanted to go to this Witchy store so badly as a teenage girl. I can't even express to you. I so wanted it to be round the corner so I could go and get my witchy supplies from there. It just looked unreal. While they're in the Witchy store looking around, Bonnie passes Sarah a magical journal, like a book of mirrors kind of thing, and tries to encourage Sarah to steal it. Sarah refuses, which kind of separates Sarah from the other three girls who have already said quite liberally that they steal from this place. And Bonnie explains to Sarah, this is different from a usual journal. You put your spells and your power thoughts in this, and then you never let anybody else read it ever, except maybe us. And I remember being worried about that too. I think from a very early age, I was not a coven girly, and I was kind of very careful about keeping things close to my chest and not oversharing. And I realised that this is another attempt for the girls to foster closeness with Sarah, because Bonnie is saying basically, you know, you would let us read what you put in the magical journal, right? You just wouldn't let anybody else, but you could show it to us. And I was like, could she though? Or are you going to use what she writes in it as ammunition to hurt her later in the movie?
You're not like your friends.
So when the girls leave the Witchy store, this guy comes back, this vagrant guy with the snake in his hands, and Sarah sees him as she's walking down the street. Actually, as she's running away from him, she bumps into a Christian preacher who tells her to come back to Jesus, which I found to be a nice touch and very funny. And then basically the girls use their combined powers to cause an accident that kills this guy who's trying to tell her that he needs to talk to her. He says to her before he dies that he had a dream about her, and in the dream she was dead. So my theory about this was that this poor guy with the snake had somehow gotten mixed up. He'd somehow tapped into the vibrations that Sarah's deceased mother was trying to send to her from beyond the grave. So I felt like it was kind of a warning from Sarah's mother to watch out for these girls and watch out for the situation, because it could put her in danger. Anyway, they take him out of the equation because he experiences death by fast moving car on an LA road. And then they end up amidst the trees together, talking excitedly about their magical insights and their magical experiences. And that is when Sarah explains to them some of the magical experiences that she's had, and they tell her about this deity called Manon, which I spent a large chunk of my life thinking was Manol because they pronounce it so weirdly. It's actually Manon, but every single time they say it in the movie, I would argue strongly for the fact that it sounds like they're saying Manol because they don't pronounce the N. So the way that they say it, it made me confused about the spelling. It was only later when I looked it up online that I was like, oh, Manon. Okay, fair enough. The Wiccan advisor, Pat Devins, I think, that they had working on the movie, advised them specifically not to use the name of a real deity. So they were looking around for a real deity that they could use. And the Wiccan advisor was like, don't use a real deity, because later on when they invoke the deity, they might end up invoking actually a real deity. And also it would cause offense to witches that work with any specific real deity. So they chose this fake deity called Manon. Nancy tells Sarah that when you invoke the spirit of Manon, he makes everything in your life all better again. And Sarah says nothing makes everything all better again. And this further sort of differentiates her from the other girls, because you can see that Sarah, or at least this is my take on it, Sarah is way more spiritually and emotionally mature than the other girls. Sarah understands that there isn't a way that you can make everything all better again, and maybe that should not be the aim of invoking a deity. Sarah leaves and she's really freaked out by what the girls are suggesting, you know, the idea of invoking a deity to make everything better again. I think the girls are getting quite heavy quite quickly with Sarah, and she's not prepared. So she goes off, and then Rochelle says,
she'll be back.
and indeed, Rochelle was correct. Sarah will be back. Sarah wants more of this magical shit. Even though she's freaked out, she's also engaged and intrigued.
A natural witch.
Sarah starts to realise that Chris is just a massive asshole. She goes on a date with him, and everything that he says is just dumb. And basically she invites him back to her place to have sex, essentially, and she declines his invitation. And you can see from the look on his face in the movie that he is so bitter and he's trying to hide it. He's so angry to have been rebuffed by her that he's like, yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, That's cool. But of course, we know that it's not going to be cool. The next day, she goes into school and he's spread these rumors around all over the place that they did sleep together and that she was no good in bed. Again, very sadly, it's common for lots of teenage girls to experience this kind of thing when they are the victim of male posturing and boys spread lies about them, right? You know, so again, it's this really sort of like salient portrayal of what it's like to go to school. What it's like to go to school and be confused and be a woman and just be trying to come into yourself and having to deal with this bullshit, you know? So I remember feeling very hurt for Sarah and particularly like betrayed on her behalf. Nancy says to Sarah, you know, I told you Chris was a jerk, which kind of further cements their bond because Nancy had previously tried to warn Sarah away from this dick. So basically then I think that's what pushes Sarah to explore magic a bit more and to come into closeness with the girls. She realizes that they at that point are more allies than Chris would be. It's very teen girl relatable. It's very kind of like witchcraft as a metaphor for feminine rage and feminine hurt. And I don't actually see real witchcraft as that, but I think it's very coded that way in the movie. I definitely knew from that moment, even on the very first watch, that like Chris was going to get his, okay? Because what can witchcraft give you the power to do? Make things even, redress imbalances. And that is definitely what's going to happen to Chris in this upcoming scene from my t-shirt. Unfortunately, very unfortunately, we happen to meet Laura, who is a blonde, airheaded future Trump supporter. She is very like cruel cheerleader kind of coded, and she sabotages Rochelle's diving practice and is clearly bullying Rochelle. She spews racist shit at Rochelle in the changing rooms. I remember when I first watched this movie, I thought two things about the changing room scene. One, Rachel True playing Rochelle in this movie is luminescent in this scene. She's such a beautiful, beautiful girl. Two, I want to see Laura feel the long fucking arm and the severe wrath of Manon. Let's fucking go. Like, fuck her. This might be an important time to mention when it comes to the racism storyline in Rochelle's story in The Craft, that Rachel True was actually unhappy with this because when Rochelle was first written, she was written with an eating disorder storyline. So obviously all of the girls have different problems, right? Sarah's obviously had mental health problems. Her mother died, etc. She's moved to this new place. Nancy's got financial issues, horrible stepfather. Her mother is definitely a drunk, right? You know, there's a lot going on there. Bonnie has these scars. There's obviously been some kind of accident and she's dealing with feelings of insecurity around that. Rochelle's storyline was going to be that she was going to have an eating disorder, and Rochelle was actually not written as a specifically black character, but the director, upon meeting Rachel True, really loved Rachel and thought she would be perfect for the part and switched her in for Rochelle. But then at that point, once they'd cast Rachel True, they decided, okay, Rochelle's going to have this racism storyline. And I think, you know, I don't want to paraphrase Rachel True too much. You can read what she said and see what she said about this. But I think basically her point of view was like, this isn't a personal problem. You know, this is something that black girls deal with. Why should this be my storyline? Why didn't I get a proper storyline? Why didn't I get a proper backstory where you get to know something about my family or my wider life as Rochelle? None of that happened. It was just switched to kind of like, okay, well, we have a black girl now for Rochelle, so obviously we're going to have a racism storyline. So Rachel True did voice some concern about that sort of flat, one-dimensional part to her character. But I think she also later did go on to say that she did recognize that it was significant that The Craft in 1996 brought up this racism storyline, because she said that she'd seen a lot of other similar types of films and similar types of themes, and none of this had ever been addressed. And in the mid-90s, maybe it was important that racism was addressed. So I think it was kind of half and half for Rachel True on that. By the way, Rachel True once liked one of my tweets many moons ago and I died. I died. I love her. The scene where the girls are going on their witchy road trip on the bus is so good, guys. I love that scene so much. It's classic. Nancy is wearing shades with red lenses, and I'm sure that that was the origin story of why I always have at least one pair of shades with red lenses, and I always have. I was wearing mine only yesterday. I never got over it. Okay, it's such a beautiful touch. The part where they leave the bus and the bus driver says, "You girls watch out for those weirdos," and Nancy says,
We are the weirdos, mister.
Iconic. iconic. So you've got Juliana Hatfield's cover of Witchy's song by Marianne Faithfull playing as the girls like walk through the woods, and it's a beautiful sunny day, and you just feel really positive and happy that these girls are going to do witchcraft together. They're finally going to do some witchcraft together. It's a big deal. And Rochelle is carrying this massive black rucksack that contains all of this witchy stuff in it, like a stone pentacle and a chalice and an athame and bottles of stuff and tarot cards. I remember thinking, why the fuck is Rochelle carrying everything in that massive rucksack? Can we not share the labour just slightly? So they prick their fingers, put the blood into the chalice, and they all go round and they basically speak their intentions for this spell. And by the way, when Nev Campbell spoke about wanting to be outwardly beautiful as part of the spell, I really did have to suspend my disbelief. Is that the way you say it? Suspend your disbelief? I had to do that because Nev Campbell was literally one of the most beautiful women in Hollywood at the time, so that made no sense. But obviously for her, she felt this massive insecurity and she didn't want to get her arms out or her back out because she had this scarring on her body. So she cast for that. Nancy wanted to take on all the power of Manon, which we know happened. Sarah cast essentially a love spell on Chris Hooker. And Rochelle, and I want you to pay attention to this, Rochelle cast for asking for the ability not to hate people who hate her. That's what she cast for. And she mentions Laura being one of those people, right? She calls her a Reese's piece of bleach blonde shit, which I think is beautiful. When the butterflies come at the end of the spell, you know, all of those butterflies come down and the girls are just really entranced by this beautiful experience. That always made me feel the way I felt whenever I knew that magic was real. I just want to say that was just such a beautiful touch.
As above, so below.
I love the scene where Sarah's love spell starts working on Chris and he's following her into mass and just kind of like, you know, asking her, do you hate me? You know, like really wanting to get her attention. And he's kind of carrying her books and his friends are laughing at him because the love spell is working and he just wants Sarah's attention and he just wants Sarah to like him and put him in her good graces again. Chris also explains to her on the way into mass that the reason that he lied about her is because when you're a guy, people expect things, right? So obviously it's not just a love spell. It's also a little bit of a truth elixir that is making him become very honest about his toxic masculinity and why he lied about Sarah. So that's really interesting. It's not just that he's become obsessed with her because of the magic. He's also wanting to be honest with her about the truth, which is that is why he did lie, that he slept with her, right? Because when you're a guy, people expect things. So he's basically saying, you know, because of patriarchy, I did this to you. And he assures her that he's going to tell his friends the truth tomorrow. He's going to tell them that he did not sleep with her. And he's, as Sarah puts it, a lying sack of shit. So because the spell is working, Chris is kind of facing up to his behavior. He's behaving very weirdly. Bonnie and Sarah are laughing at him. And Rochelle points over to what is going on with them and says to Nancy, oh my God, look, her spell is working. You have to see this. Her spell is working. And you can tell in that scene that Nancy is actually very jealous of Sarah. She's not excited to see Sarah's spell working. She's clearly envious of Sarah's power because Sarah is now really coming out on top as the alpha witch of the group, you know. She's turned up and suddenly everything's getting very spicy and magical and exciting. So Nancy does not really quite know what to do with her feelings about this because she was top dog and now Sarah's top banana, you know. So it's a little bit difficult between them at this point. One of my favorite scenes from The Craft is when the four of them are walking through the school grounds, owning recess, looking like a tight as fuck esoteric army, the four of them, and they're in their element now. They've done some magic together, their spells have started working, they're beginning to really gel with each other, and they look like a magical fighting force. And this is another big fashion moment for me in the movie because honestly, Rachel True wearing those black braces over her school top just blew me out of the water, okay? A long time before Patti Smith made me want to wear braces, Rachel True playing Rochelle in The Craft made me want to wear braces because she just looks like a boss ass witch bitch and I was in love. It was very mesmerizing. It was all very mesmerizing. It still is. I love it. And I love the music. I don't know who sings it, but it goes, she's not like you, the dangerous type. I love it. That scene, you could play that on repeat several hundred times and I wouldn't complain. You could put me in that thing they have in Clockwork Orange where your eyes are forced open and you just have to keep watching that scene over and over. over and I'd be like, I'm fine with this. Is this supposed to be a punishment of some kind? Because I love this scene. I'll watch it on repeat, no problem. So then Sarah catches up with racist Laura in the hallway and pulls her hair out. And Laura is like, what the fuck, you pulled my hair? And Sarah says, sorry, I thought I saw a bug. They have shampoo for that, you know. And Laura is like, you stupid bitch, right? It's a real catty girlhood showdown occurs in the school hallway there. Sarah actually tells Rochelle at one point when they're hanging out together that if Laura doesn't say or do anything bad to Rochelle, then nothing bad will happen to her. But actually, unfortunately, Laura can't shut her stupid racist mouth. And so Laura actually does begin to lose her hair during the course of the movie. So it wasn't really actually Rochelle that did that, right? Rochelle asked for the power to be able to not hate those who hate her. Whereas Sarah is the one that actually put the little hair hex on Laura. So I just find that interesting. And there's a reason I find it interesting, which we'll come back to later on. But yeah, that was an interesting double spell. So Rochelle's spell was really about her wanting to not let hatred form in her own heart just because of the racism she was experiencing. Sarah is the one that saw Laura in the hallway and was like, you don't treat my friend like shit, fuck you, I'm going to pull your hair, right? But it could have been a combined spell between Rochelle and Sarah, I don't know, but either way, Laura's going to lose her hair. That bitch is going to lose her hair, okay? That's what happens. Another scene that I really love in The Craft is when the girls are sitting together on the green in their school grounds, and Bonnie and Rochelle are just giving Sarah credit for helping the magic to work, basically. So they're really excited because Bonnie's scars have gone. Rochelle is excited because Laura's losing her hair and has to wear a hat. And they're basically saying to Sarah, you did it, you know, your power is making these things happen. Nancy is in the back, all goffed up, sat on the bench having a sulk, because again, you can really sense that envy is starting to fucking take hold of Nancy, and she can't handle that Sarah is getting all of this shine from the other two girls. And I remember watching this when I was a kid and thinking, oh no, this is scary. Nancy's going to freak out. Nancy is not going to be liking this at all. I really love the part where Nancy walks off and Rochelle says, I don't know, I think Nancy's just upset because she doesn't want to be white trash anymore. And I told her, you're white, honey, just deal with it. That's just such a classic part of The Craft, honestly. Nancy goes back to her trailer where she lives in the trailer park with her mom and her pervy arsehole stepdad. And she's doing this really elaborate working at her incredibly packed, really punk-looking altar. I mean, Nancy's altar is just iconic as fuck. I don't know how many times I've said iconic during the course of this video so far, but you can't say you blame me, right? So then Nancy comes out, there's a situation, the stepfather tries to cross the line with her, and then he goes to hit Nancy's mom. He has a heart attack because Nancy puts the witchy power on him and he promptly dies. So we know that actually Nancy very quickly ceases to become white trash because her pervy arsehole stepdad dies and his insurance policy pays out dividends. So suddenly out of nowhere, Nancy and her mom, who were previously poor as fuck, are now rich as hell. So Nancy was not white trash for that much longer, at least not in terms of bank balance. The girls go and visit Nancy and her mom in their swanky new apartment, and this was another key fashion moment for me, guys. Key fashion moment, because they're both wearing boss bitch two pieces. Nancy's mom is wearing this lavender number, and Nancy, of course, is in black. But they're both kind of wearing this sort of like, we now have corporate sponsorship kind of two pieces, which I really loved. I thought that was a really great touch, the way they're both dressed up like they're sort of like business babes now because they have all this money. And how amazing is Nancy's mum having that jukebox that plays nothing but Connie Francis? I always thought that was just such a great touch for this movie. I loved it. So random, but so something Nancy's mum would do. She's just eccentric as hell. I love it. Okay, this is the part of the movie where things get crazy, all right? The girls invoke the spirit of Manon, and you know that this is where the turning point is in the film, because Nancy is fucking walking on water. Okay, there are sharks washed up on the beach, and Nancy has that mad bitch look in her eye now, right? Like, she literally has been filled with the spirit of Manon. She doesn't know what to do with it. She has no moral compass and all of the magical power. So you can tell from that point on, and Sarah is watching the scene being like, oh, Jesus. Oh, this is not good. This is not good at all. From this point on, Bonnie and Rochelle are about to really, really become Nancy's full-on goth minions. They're going to start dressing like her. They're going to start acting bitchy like her. And Sarah is going to have to contend with these three ganging up on her, which is going to be super scary. But first of all, Sarah's love spell on Chris is going to get out of hand. So she finds herself alone with him in his car. He hassles her, harasses her, and basically tries to SA her. And she has to run away to Rochelle's house for sanctuary. This was really scary for me to watch when I was younger. It really fucking freaked me out. It's just a really uncomfortable scene. It's just really scary. And I got that it was supposed to be a cautionary tale against, you know, Sarah using magic to control Chris. Obviously, she didn't know what she was getting into. She didn't know like how deep that hole was going to go and how much it was going to affect him. And even though she could control the spell that she put on him, she couldn't control the outcome of it. But actually, what I found really interesting was that the way that Chris behaved when he hassles her and like tries to assault her, I found was more in keeping with the way that he was beforehand. So even though I knew when I was watching the film that it's not okay to put a love spell on this guy, it's not great to try and control the way he feels, I also noticed that when he was under the love spell, all the time up until that point in the movie, the love spell had made him nothing but subservient, passive, respectful, and kind of just desperate for her attention. Like, he actually became this very sweet version of himself under the enchantment. So the way that I saw it was that when he tried to SA her, that was him returning to his misogynistic, toxic male behavior. So to me, it was almost like her love spell had kind of worn off. It had worn off rather than the love spell getting to this awful point where he would attempt something like that. The way that I saw it was that the love spell had worn off. He'd come back to his senses and he was feeling incredibly wound up and out of control. And now he's back to his old self. He's going to try and take what he wants by force. I kind of saw it that way. I don't know if anybody else saw it that way, but I kind of felt like, oh, I don't think that's Sarah's spell. I think that's him coming back to his senses and realizing that he's a complete bastard. That's what I think just happened. Nancy is not happy about this. She wants her revenge on Chris. And that scene where she's walking towards the basic bitch, teenage, popular kid party is poetry. It is so indicative of what my teenage years were like. That is how I felt. That is always how I felt. I felt like I was always walking into that party and like sticking my tongue out at some basic bitch that was judging me. It's a perfect scene. Oh my God, the scene where Nancy confronts Chris and then he falls out of the window. Genius. Absolutely love it. I'm wearing a whole ass t-shirt just commemorating the brilliance of that scene. It was so feminine rage. It was so like standing up to patriarchal bullshit. I loved the way her hobnail boots were dragging along the floor and Chris was just getting more and more fucking freaked out. And she's saying the only way you know how to treat women is by treating them like whores when you're the whore, and that's gonna stop. Like, ugh. So powerful. I loved this scene with all of my heart. I still do. And when I watched it the other day, I was like, this is femme perfection. It really is.
Oh, he's sorry.
So everything starts to get very scary in the movie from this point on. Sarah has a dream where the three other girls try to choke her. They fly in through the window and try and choke her. And we find out later that they actually sent that dream to her. They actually sort of like enchanted her dream world to give her this terrifying nightmare. And then the girls catch up with her in the school toilets and she says that she wants to leave the circle. And that's when Nancy says, you know, in the old days, if a witch betrayed her coven, they would kill her. So that is not even a remotely veiled threat. That is a live fucking threat, and things become really scary. And this is also very teenage girl coded. The idea of alliances forming and alliances changing, and sometimes never really knowing where you are with certain girls, you know, because there could be that bitchiness and that pettiness and that jealousy, because we're all jostling for position, trying to figure out what the fuck is going on, with hormones raging, trying to figure out what our identity is and where we fit in. And Bonnie and Rochelle, they want to follow Nancy. They think Nancy is the powerful one and the strong one. They're afraid of her. And because of that fear, they really start to fall in line with Nancy. They goth it up and they're mean to Sarah. They're very, very bitchy and catty. And I remember that freaking me out because Bonnie and Rochelle seemed so sweet earlier in the movie. Nancy was always Nancy was always a wild card. Nancy was always a bit scary, but Bonnie and Rochelle, when they started to get bitchy, I was like, no, not Bonnie and Rochelle. They're lovely. Sarah then goes back to the Witchy store to see Lario, and she basically says, you know, Nancy's inside my head. She's inside my dreams. She knows my thoughts, you know, and she's gone to get comfort from this wise witchy woman, essentially. So she's looking for that mother figure that actually understands the world that she's in. This really does remind me sometimes of like the mind games that you sometimes feel that somebody's playing on you, and the amount of control that they have over you, the way you think, the way you feel about yourself, the way you are perceiving situations, you know. So there's really that sense of like manipulating somebody's sense of stable foundation and making them feel like they're just out of control. And Nancy really was that symbol of someone that, because she was not happy with herself, and now because she has all of this power, she's really going to make life hell for Sarah. So then Lario takes Sarah back to the backstage neon witchy temple behind that curtain. Who the fuck else wanted that temple for themselves? Oh my gosh, the neon temple built on a place of power. Insane. I absolutely love. The first time I saw The Craft and she takes her back to that temple in the back, I'm like, what the fuck? I need everything this woman has. I need everything this woman is. Oh my God, I love Assumpta Serna playing Lario in The Craft. Absolutely loved it. And do you remember when she lights all the candles and they all light up at the same time? Amazing party trick there. Amazing. And basically she tells Sarah, you know, you need to invoke the spirit of Manon. And Sarah's like, but it made Nancy crazy. And Lario's like, oh, she takes it to a dark place. It'll be fine when you do it. But Sarah like runs off. She's like, I can't fucking handle this shit. Love the temple. The temple was boss as hell.
You must not be afraid.
It's so scary when the girls go to Sarah's house and they put the glamour on her and they make her think that her parents are dead. And then there's all the snakes and the rats and the maggots in the toilet and the scorpions in the sink. And it just gets way out of hand, guys. It gets so out of hand. Oh my goddess. Do you remember the really scary jump scare when Sarah's in the shower hiding from all these bugs and everything? And then Nancy rips the door open and she says, if I was as pathetic as you are, I would have killed myself ages ago. You should get on with it. Honestly, if anyone has ever had anybody say anything that chilling to them, you're going to know the emotional effect that that has. And that was one of the things that made the movie so scary. I don't think it was really, you know, the magic so much. It was the ferocity with which Nancy went after Sarah. It was the cruelty of it. It was bringing up things like the death of her mother and things like that. It was just like straight up bullying. And as a teenage girl, that really got to me and it made me feel sick as hell. Fairuza Balk did her thing in this movie though. Like, I think she did an Oscar-winning performance. I think this last leg of the movie where her and Sarah have a showdown with each other is exceptional. Really great acting from her. And also, can I just say, the hairdresser for The Craft found an impressive amount of things to do with Fairuza's hair. She had quite a short hairstyle for the movie, or like short hair. And I think the hairdresser just found so many awesome things to do with it. It's different in every single scene. It's very, very impressive. So Bonnie and Rochelle are forced to go upstairs at knife point by Nancy. They are totally in Nancy's control now. Nancy has all the fucking power. And as they're going upstairs, Sarah puts an enchantment on them so that they look in the mirror and they see the threefold law happening right in front of them. So Bonnie has scarring all over her face and Rochelle has lost her hair. And this is supposed to be the 3 times 3 thing, right? Whatever you put back, you get, whatever you put out, you get back times 3. I did find it weird though, that scene, because Bonnie never cast a spell for anybody else to become scarred. She only cast a spell for herself to not be scarred anymore. And Rochelle never cast a spell for Laura to lose her hair. She cast a spell to not hate others as much as they hated her. It was Sarah who cast the spell for Laura to lose her hair. So it kind of didn't really add up to me, but I see what Sarah did anyway. I kind of think of it as like Sarah wanted them to look in the mirror and see the things that would make them most afraid and make them sick and make them see this is the threefold law of return. You know, you're getting back what you put out. Those two are freaked out. They cannot stand the esoteric heat in the magical kitchen, and they both fuck off and leave Nancy and Sarah to have an insane showdown at the end of the movie. Sarah reverses the glamour onto Nancy, totally freaks Nancy out, and then she tries to bind Nancy, and Nancy is not having it, and she goes for Sarah, and they have the most insanely epic catfight that I've ever seen in a movie. I remember in 1997 at the MTV Awards, it won the best fight scene. The award was delivered by Hanson. It was simpler times. It was much simpler times. You can see the footage on YouTube. Oh, it was so long ago now. Oh my goddess. I loved this scene. I think it's really scary. I think it's really magical. I think it's like a classic good versus evil showdown battle, light versus darkness vibe, you know? And I just think both of the girls are totally badass in this scene, like magically fighting it out with each other for dominance and for control. I love it when Sarah says, "Oh, by the way, I've got a message for you from Manon. You're in deep shit." So badass. I love it. The final scene of The Craft is that really awkward scene where Bonnie and Rochelle go to visit Sarah to apologize for their behavior while they were under Nancy's control. And they're not under Nancy's thumb anymore. So they've both gone back to dressing how they did previously. Because remember, they had gotten really gothed up while they were Nancy's little minions. And now Nancy's gone, they're like back to dressing like they were previously. And actually, this is Bonnie's strongest outfit of the movie, in my opinion. I think Neve Campbell looks amazing in that classic like 90s pinstripe shirt dress with the big collar and the sort of like long cuffs that almost go over her hands. I loved that shirt dress thing. I thought that was amazing. I also think this is Sarah's strongest outfit of the movie, the pale silk dress with the fluffy cardigan. Again, very top tier 90s, very beautifully done. And of course, we all know what happened to Nancy. She did ended up getting bound by Sarah. She ended up literally bound to a bed in a mental health ward. So don't fuck with Sarah, and certainly don't fuck with Manon, because that is what will happen.
Be careful. You don't end up like Nancy.
Darlings, I have loved going down memory lane talking about this most incredible witchcraft movie. I absolutely love it. It's fresh as a daisy. It came out in 1996 and I still enjoy my viewing experience now. Let me know down below anything and everything that you feel about the original 1996 Craft movie. Fucking love it, guys. Do you love it too? If so, why? If not, why not? Let's talk it up in the comments. Very fun little pastime, nothing too serious today. I just really wanted to get into my love for this movie and everything that it's given to me, and the many instances of like enjoyable watching of this movie that I've done over time. Can't tell you how many times I've watched it, but goddamn, it's a lot. Okay, much love until next time, my darlings. Blessed be. Mwah.